Hello and welcome everyone to the second presentation that has been given to those who attended the 2 rounds of community town halls this last summer of 2025. This is an effort that is being led by Chris Lama and Kathleen Hatton at Community Services. Of course, the city librarian, Julie Zioli, the city's library consultant who has been helping them over the last year set up your interim system, Elizabeth Goldman, and myself, Jim Favaro, and my partner, Steve Johnson. I am Jim Favaro giving you this presentation, again, the second that has been given this summer. We had a first round of community town halls in June and a second round in the first week of August. Each of them were identical. They were about 90 minutes in length, preceded by introductions and a presentation, and then about an hour of community discussion based on the presentation. I'll begin with reminding everyone of the circumstances that have led to the initiation of this study, which begins with the City of Irvine departing from the County of Orange Public Library system. They have left behind 3 formerly OCPL branch libraries within city limits. They are Katie Wheeler, University Park, and Heritage Park. Of those, 2 of them are under lease, and that at the end of that lease, they will be turned back to the city, to the County of Orange. The city does not own these facilities. They only have temporary use of them. 3-year lease for Katie Wheeler, which will expire in 2028, I believe, or perhaps even earlier. And at that point, you will be left with 2 branch libraries, University Park and Heritage Park. In 5 years, University Park will be returned back to the county, at which point the city will have 1 community library, the 21,000 square foot Heritage Park Library in District 3. In the meantime, this library, the new city library system, has been hiring staff, developing interim planning to make sure the system in the 5 years that they have is running properly in service to you, the community, and also participating in the long-term planning for what happens after the 5-year time frame when the city will begin to build out its own system. This was put into action by City Council last April, at which they directed City Manager's Office to come back to them in a matter of 4 or 5 months with a clear framework of an idea for what that long-term system for the city's library system will be. And of course, they want a system that works for everyone across the city, which of course precipitates 4 important topics that must be addressed in reporting back to the City Council, which is that main and branch libraries are well located and supported by the community, that they're right-sized for the kinds of support that they are giving the community, that they are both feasible and suitable on the sites that have been selected, and in so selecting and developing, they are cost-effective, both in terms of their capital development, the capital investment required for the development, as well as operations costs over time. So it has been about a 4-month effort that will conclude in September. First phase discovery included the 6 community town halls that I mentioned in early June, which were followed in early August by 2 follow-up community town halls. We've been in constant communication with Community Services, the City Librarian, City Manager's Office throughout the process, and the plan now is to report back to City Council with the findings of this effort on October 14th. At each of the town halls, we asked those present to consider 3 topics. Do the locations that are being put forth work for you in your community? Are they sized properly? Meaning, have we got the programs and services, at least in general, before any real planning or design takes place? Are they pretty much where you see your community library being in order to properly serve you? And having seen the sites, do you feel that they will fit well, that they will fit both on their sites and in their neighborhoods well in a mutually beneficial manner? And do you understand that we can feasibly fit these libraries on the site in a way that is both cost effective and again suitable for their sites? In the second round of town halls, we asked a fourth question, raised a fourth issue, which is, given what's being preliminarily proposed at this point, how would you prioritize the allocation of funds in order to incrementally build into the system that is encompassing the sites that are under consideration? We began in the second round, as we did in the first, with an overview of the planning principles and practices that have emerged over the 250-year history of the library in the American tradition. We began with a very brief overview of the life and death and life of the community library, the first 150 years of the tradition, pretty clearly indicating the importance that libraries had in the Republic as one of the foundations, along with free public education, of a fully functioning democracy. Followed by about a 50-year decline in the quality of architecture, with the simultaneous development of innovations on the part of mainly librarians in enhancing the kinds of services that community libraries can deliver, and the reemergence in the 21st century, recalling some of the earlier aspects of the architectural tradition while incorporating the many innovations that took place over the latter half of the 20th century. And in doing so, they have reemerged, revitalized, recalling, for example, on the left, some of the dignity and repose and sense of monumentality, the importance and presence of these buildings and the communities that they serve, reviving that sense of the importance of the library in the life of a community, but more welcoming, more open, more flooded with daylight, more access and relationship to the sites in which they reside. And primarily that at the foundation of the new principles that guide the design of libraries are a sense of openness and flexibility in floor plates, so that no longer contained within fixed rooms, but there are opportunities across wide floor plates for a variety of kinds of seating arrangements. And these can be intimate groups, they can be larger groups, and they can of course still and will always be a place to sit alone in a nook within a book stack near a window for concentration, focus, and study. Obviously, what is new in the 21st century is connectivity, which has to be everywhere. Even technology is mobile now. No longer do we need fixed computers. Everyone has mobile computing at hand, and so every seat, every table, every location where one might find himself or herself in the library needs to be connected to the digital technology systems. Of great innovation of the librarians of the last, let's say, 100 years has been increasing attention to intergenerational cohort, particularly, for example, a long neglected cohort, which are teenagers and young adults. So teenage and young adult libraries within the larger library are increasingly important components of the contemporary library. And of course, attention to children, and not only children, but every developmental level within the children's cohort, beginning at infants and toddlers, moving through older children, and offering, again, a variety of ways to be in the library, from active play to concentrated focus and homework study. Always a degree of magic and wonder instilled in a community library, particularly to maintain the attention and commitment and loyalty of a young child to the community library throughout his or her lifetime. Also, the increasing sense that a library is in some respects a community center, a place where people come to meet, to congregate, to socialize, extremely important in the contemporary library, as are other kinds of functions, such as the storage of city archives, local history, exhibit space, visual and performing arts, seminars, conferences of all sorts that can take place at a community library, and other kinds of programming, such as culinary and nutrition educational programs associated with the library. We talked also a little bit about the character and quality of the look of the architecture, that it must be tailored to communities. We gave examples of libraries that are tailored to their specific locations and communities within Southern California, none, of course, which like anything like the City of Irvine. We even gave an example of how libraries can really differ depending on where they are in the same system. So, for example, the City of Thousand Oaks has two major libraries within their three-branch system. Their central library up in the upper right in a more pastoral setting. Their library on the west side is in a more urban setting. Therefore, their architecture reflect where they are in the city. And we gave examples and really encouraged the community to look at other examples across the country. There's lots of innovation, both in programming and in architecture, from Seattle to Charlotte. One great example is the Austin Central Library, which has instituted some programmatic innovations, which include a culinary instructional theater, a rooftop terrace on the roof of the library overlooking downtown Austin, and at the ground floor, a fully functioning restaurant that actually operates independently of the library. And of course, innovations such as the Library of Things, spreading across the country in an effort to be invest in more sustainable kinds of consumption habits on the behalf of library patrons, to the extent where you can borrow kinds of things that you might use rarely, and therefore do not need to actually purchase. So we also delve quite deeply and a fair amount of detail into understanding the proper sizes of these main and branch libraries by looking how their program components would fit. These are developed from all the examples I just showed you. They are pretty reliable in terms of us understanding the kinds of spaces we need through which to develop the programs and services. This, for a typical branch library serving a population of roughly equivalent to one of your 6 districts, is arrived at around 28,000 square feet and includes all those program components that I mentioned earlier. The entrance, marketplace, circulation services, children's library, young adults, library of things, periodicals, staff and administrative offices and facilities, as well as meeting rooms and building services. And then expanded upon that to reach a double branch, if you will, of secondary main, reasons which will become clear shortly, essentially taking a branch library and almost doubling it in size, in which there was just more of everything plus a couple additional library components, and then a full-on flagship main library, which again is essentially more of everything with the addition of extra programmatic additions, such as, for example, a larger, more theatrical formatted auditorium, culinary, instructional, and nutritional educational facility, ESL and literacy center, a more robust local history collection that you wouldn't find in a typical branch library. So we ended up, and we will, short of hearing otherwise, go back to council in October with recommendations for 2 branch libraries in districts 1 and 3, 3 being the existing Heritage Park site, 1 being a hopefully purchased property by the city, each of these at roughly 28,000 square feet, and 2 main libraries, the double branch or secondary main, or what we have preliminarily identified as the Civic Center main library on the west side of town, will serve both districts 5 and 6 quite well, and there seems to be a great amount of agreement amongst the community that is the case. And then on the east side, the flagship main library at the north side of Great Park at about 110,000 square feet. So the two larger libraries, the one in Great Park and the other at Bill Barber Park adjacent to Civic Center, and two branch libraries, one on a piece of property currently owned by the Irvine Ranch Conservancy. They and the city are in negotiations on the city purchasing that property. And finally, the other branch at Heritage Park. So these are the 4 sites that we're now going to discuss with you in terms of the fit and feasibility of the libraries that I just described. Where we have District 1 branch of approximately 28,000, District 2, the flagship within Great Park at about 110, and these are all again approximate. District 3 branch at 28, and Districts 5 and 6 at approximately 42, at around 210,000 square feet for the total system. At this point, you may observe that District 4 has not been addressed. Although it has been partially addressed. So we did preliminarily look at Knollcrest Park and Quail Hill Community Park for possible locations, but they would really only serve what we refer to as the lowlands or the northeast area of District 4. And we believe, and the community seems to agree, that these 4 neighborhoods will be actually well served by the Heritage Park branch and the Great Park main library. Access to them is quite easy. There are arterials giving access to them, and they're not too far out of the 2-mile radius that we have identified, which left the, let's just call it the highlands, or the southwest corner area of District 4, the Turtle Rock neighborhood. We did consider briefly a very beautiful site, which is Turtle Rock Community Park. They're almost at the top of the mountain, of the hills, but that was pretty much summarily dismissed by the community there. They did not see that as a viable location, so that has been removed as a candidate for serving District 4. Many of those same community members asked why not expand at University Park, where there is the existing county branch library, and so we did look closely at that. The challenges of this site are that, one, the elementary school actually captures the major frontage, which is Michelson Drive, and therefore the county library is buried within the neighborhood, and only about 10 or 11,000 square feet, and it is owned by the county, and the county is not turning it over to the city. Keep in mind that this library was built 50 years ago when Irvine was a very different place. Most of development was concentrated in this area of town around the university. The rest of the park is really a neighborhood park. It's surrounded by pretty intimate neighborhood streets, but as was requested, we looked at the possibility of installing a 28,000 square foot branch to replace the Orange County branch that's there. Feel the best place, were there to be a place to do, would be off of Beech Tree Lane with the required parking enhancements, because again, we won't have access to the county library parking, adjacent to the existing community center, which eventually also would need to be replaced. But as you can see, we've consumed now a lot of that neighborhood park open space, and we have a parking lot butted up against the neighbors. And if we were to consolidate the footprint, perhaps into a combined community center and library with a 2-story building, we'd have a fairly massive building overlooking this pretty modestly scaled residential neighborhood with plenty of parking, but having reduced the amount of open space. So we do not believe that University Park is a viable option, not to mention it is also redundant if the city chooses to go forth with the Civic Center library site in Bill Barber Memorial Park. There really is no need to expand at University Park. So we will be going back to council with 4 sites recommended to them, and we'll leave District 4 for another time. I'll go through each of those 4 sites, but I do want to remind everyone about what our purpose is, which is our task at hand, as directed by council, is to come back to them with a reasonable indication of where libraries can be located and that they can be reasonably fit on the sites. And by fit, we mean both in terms of how they operate, how they relate to their communities, and their feasibility. Can the sites be developed reasonably feasibly at a reasonable cost over time in terms of their development? So we really utilize diagrams to come back with those kinds of conclusions. So you'll be seeing aerial diagrams, very simple ones that show in orange how the boxes lay out on each of the sites, how they mass, how they relate to the surrounding streets and neighborhoods. You will see the same color scheme in two-dimensional plans. Again, the new buildings in orange, placed in relationship to the streets and the surrounding neighborhood. You will see what we call X-ray diagrams. For shorthand, we'll call these the blue diagrams, which show how vehicular circulation and parking situate on each of the redeveloped sites. You will be seeing what in shorthand we'll call the green diagrams, which are simply site development diagrams. What aspects of the site, in order to accommodate the new buildings, would need to be developed, both paved and unpaved, paved in the beige, unpaved in green surfaces. And if we relate that to the diagrams on the left, the existing conditions, to the diagrams on the right, we have a fairly reliable sense of what it would take to develop each of these sites. And all of this information then is passed on, which is occurring as we speak, to our cost planner in order to then come back to council with a pretty reliable, if still high level and rough order of magnitude, idea of the costs of the development of each of these library sites over time. However, we do know the diagrams are rather dry and sometimes hard for most people to read. So we are going to accompany this analysis with more rendered views, such as aerial views of each of these library sites with a new library placed on them, ground level exterior views, again, just to give us an idea of how they situate and fit on each of these sites, and even interior views. And here we should acknowledge that there can be some confusion, and it's really related to the technology of drawing these days. It's fairly easy to mock up on the computer vertical and horizontal surfaces, map materials onto them, drop in pre-made models of people and furniture and trees. And so it gives an indication that somehow these have already been designed, that they're complete, but really they're just here to help you visualize the diagrams, which are for us, again, the most important tools on the right. So the views on the left are simply help us to first create the diagrams, but mainly to help you visualize the diagrams. But they in no way want to communicate that any design has occurred, nor will design occur until down the road after council has set a direction, they've understood which projects they want to initiate, at which point there will be a much more outreach in terms of the configuration and design of each of these facilities. So I'll go through the description now, with the first one being in District 1, the Irvine Ranch Conservancy property. It's about a 6-acre site. It's actually a quite beautiful site. Sits at the intersection of Portola and Orchard Hills Drive. It's currently occupied by storage facilities and parking lots, surrounded by utilities, electrical substation, fire station, the water district's storage facilities. This now is a pretty simple diagram of how one might place a library on that site, complete with parking lots, paved and unpaved areas. Here's a close-up of it. You see the library at the corner. There would be community meeting rooms attached to it, an arrival court on one side, community terrace on the other. The parking has been justified to the east perimeter of their site, and here's a view that shows how that might realize. By the way, we're just indicating a green roof on this building as just a placeholder to keep in mind. if and when design does occur, that we have to be sensitive to the fact that there are residential neighbors uphill from this, and they'll be looking down at a fairly large roof that we need to be sensitive about. I am now going to show you 4 ground level views. One will be from the intersection of Portola and Orchard Hills Drive. Another will be as you enter the site from Orchard Hills Drive, looking back at the library. A third will be as you approach the arrival court and the library front door. And a fourth will be from having passed through the library, looking back at the community terrace towards that corner of Portola and Orchard. So here we are now at street level. There's an existing Orchard Hills Village monument sign. It's quite beautiful, and it seems rather appropriate that the first building you see is the community center and the library as you enter this neighborhood from the corner there. As you enter the site itself, you're now looking back at the library and out over the valley towards the south and the west. You see the library is fairly low in its massing. It's fairly modest in scale, and in front of it is a generously scaled new park and outdoor community event space. As you move around now to the approach to the arrival court, right at the front door, looking at the library, finally, having passed through the library, the entrance and the community meeting rooms to the right, the monument sign way on the left that we started with. This is beautiful space looking out over the Irvine Valley towards the south and the west. So hopefully, having seen those visualizations, one can now understand the rather dry site plan diagram. And I do want to point out that this is really just to get at the cost and feasibility. When you get into design, you may turn the library 90 degrees, you may push it one way or another, configure it in another way. It doesn't really matter. The amount of parking, the amount of building footprint, the amount of site development will always remain the same within the property line. We will be able to return to council with a very reliable idea of what it will cost to develop this site. For the sake of completion, here's the blue diagram that shows how vehicular circulation works, pick up and drop off at the library front door, parking at the perimeter. And the green diagrams, which shows site development, both paved and unpaved. You see the arrival court on one side and the community terrace on the other side. So with these diagrams now, we have a very good grasp of what it will take to develop this library and be able to come back to council confident that should they decide to move forward, they will know the capital investment required to do so. Part of this exercise also is the interior of it to make sure that it works on the site, given the agreement with the program that we developed previously and that I showed you previously. So here we are at the one and only floor of this library. The entrance in yellow, see in the light yellow library entrance, beyond a large and small community meeting room. To the right is the marketplace, adults, young adults, children, staff entering, located at the center of the floor plate. Here again, I'll take you through with 4 interior views: the library entrance, community meeting rooms, the children's library, moving back to the adults, looking back towards young adults and children, and finally from adults out to that new community park and outdoor events space. Here we are at the library entrance, looking to the community meeting rooms. I'll point out that this council member, it was very important to her, and in fact it initiated this effort that she have community meeting rooms in her district and a library attached to it. So in this case, the very first thing you see are the 2 community meeting rooms, circulation services to the left, the children immediately off the entrance, as is best practice, without traipsing through the entirety of the library on the right. Here now we are in the children's library, looking back at young adults, administration and the heart of the building. Behind that curved wood wall to the left is the children's playground area and terrace looking out over the Orchard Hills Drive Portola Valley Parkway intersection. Now we're in adults, looking back at children's across the young adults section, and finally in adults looking back towards the entrance to the site and the new park that's been developed there to the right. So it was important for us to go through that exercise to make sure that wherever we and you place this library, the internal spaces are making maximum use of of the site in which they're situated. So this last view really hopefully demonstrates that you would want your reading areas to really take maximum advantage of how they're located on the sites with surrounding park and gardens and open space. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of how Orchard Hills would work, and also gives you some sense of now how to read the diagrams. So I'll take the next 3 sites at a slightly faster clip now that we're all experts at reading diagrams and understanding how we take an existing condition to a developed condition. The Great Park site was studied previously about 1.5 years ago. It is at the intersection of Cadence and Poussin Way, just south of Irvine Boulevard, which is a great crosstown arterial across the north side of the city. It's a very large site. It's about 12 acres. It is built into the Great Park Framework Plan and has been almost from the beginning. As I said, it was studied previously. There is a published report. You're free to gain access to that through community staff. Very much worked out in a fair amount of detail. As I said, it sits adjacent to that intersection of Cadence and Poussin Way at the north entrance to the park, adjacent to what will become the future Veterans Memorial, which is currently an abandoned runway. And one shouldn't be just misled by the scale of this drawing. It's quite huge. The Veterans Memorial is, I believe, about 1,500 feet long, so like a quarter of a mile almost long in length. It's roughly equivalent to the Washington Mall. So this library's footprint is quite large, although it sits completely surrounded by park open space, as you can see in the aerial view here. What's interesting about it is there is topography to the site, which I'll show how, therefore, this works. How do we actually get parking close to the library without it adversely affecting the park-like environment of it? And we did so by taking advantage of the fact that the site drops down from Cadence about approximately 15 feet. So it's a pretty dramatic change in elevation from the road and entrance to the site down to the actual site. So all we're having to do is to place 400 parking spaces at grade and then build a structure over that, a podium, upon which the library then situates. So starting at the top, I'll take you through each floor. This is a case where you really could have and want to have a major community event space. You can imagine this for all sorts of both public and private sector events. It has spectacular views out over the park and west over the valley towards the coastal hills. One floor below, what we would call a gallery, a mezzanine level, might be where there are special collections associated with the airport base, the military base that was once there, and also just the history of the city. We have spoken with UC Irvine. They have tremendous collections. They would be thrilled to actually bring them up and out of their stacks and basements to exhibit for the community. The main floor being at that podium level that I described, where all of those functions that I've identified in the program are taking place. And at the lower floor at park level would be the parking garage itself. Provides pick-up and drop-off, again, right at the library front door. The larger auditorium facility I mentioned earlier, perhaps a full-on restaurant, which seems like it would be completely feasible in this park, like the Great Park setting. Marketplace, Friends of the Library, bookstore, and whatnot. So this is that floor looking out over the park. The parking garage itself being to the left. Friends of the Library bookstore, marketplace, restaurant beyond, entrance to the auditorium beyond. Through that aperture in the ceiling, you arrive at the main floor, the podium floor, where our children, adults, young adults, culinary and nutrition center, administrative staff. This is at the gallery or mezzanine level, looking out over the park, where there would be special collections, special reading room available to researchers and to the public. And finally, that rooftop event space with an outdoor terrace overlooking almost the entirety of the city, really almost the entirety of Orange County towards the Pacific Ocean. So here again, the three key diagrams that we will be forwarding to our cost planner and which will form the basis of the recommendations to City Council in October. One thing to point out, what's nice about this location, that it really does establish a kind of landmark entrance to the Great Park from the north, quite prominent as you arrive from the north. So balancing the center of gravity, where we have the cultural terrace at the south side of the park and these fully functioning community facility that is the flagship main library of the city at the north entrance to the park. And parenthetically, even though this isn't the highest priority for the Great Park neighborhood or for the city, it sits almost exactly in the geographic center of Orange County. So it really can be seen as a flagship facility on behalf of the city of Irvine that might serve people of all of Orange County. Heritage Park is different from the first two sites in that it already, of course, is a developed site. It has many facilities on it, which include the existing community center, the fine arts center, the preschool and training center, as well as, of course, the former branch library. The largest of the three that are in city limits, this one being roughly 21,000, so not too far off the prototype of about 28,000. Although it's not a high quality building, it's very inward looking, has minimal relationship to the park, and it is surrounded on two sides by parking lots. So our task here was to demonstrate to Council that a new and expanded library facility can co-locate on this site with the expanded Fine Arts Center, Community Center, the planning of which is currently underway through a master planning process, a separate process entirely. So that they are confident that this is indeed the right site for this library and that it can cohabitate with those other facilities in a way that's mutually beneficial to all facilities on the site, as well as the park itself. So here's a close-up view of that. As you can see, there's parking along the entirety of the Yale Avenue frontage. So you have to navigate a very large parking lot to even get to these facilities, and you have to navigate the facilities to even get to the park itself. So one way that this can work, and again, these are just studies. They are in no way meant to replace the master planning process that is taking place separately. That process can take whatever's shown here under advisement. They can completely ignore it. We are just abiding by our commitment to go back to Council with a reliable idea of how a library could fit on this site in concert with other facilities so that they're confident that this is indeed what they can plan on for the long-term future of the system. So this just shows how that might happen. So for example, we might attack first the corner lots there at the intersection of the freeway and Yale Avenue, consolidate new community center and fine arts center and early childhood development center with a structured parking. That way the parking structure itself accommodates all of the parking required for the park and expanded facilities, but also acts as a buffer against the noise and visual impacts of the freeway itself. The new building is separated from the parking structure, so the light comes in from both sides, and there's a facade running across it facing onto Yale Avenue. At which point you could then take down the existing Fine Arts Community Center and childhood development and essentially expand park open space, which is magnificent. You build new facilities and you've now expanded park open space. And you can leave the existing library in place for as long as you like. It is 50 years old. It will eventually need some work and probably would be most strategically handled by replacing it. So that might be the next step. Although I will also point out you can do this in the complete reverse order. You could do the library first and the community center second, but that's completely up to the master planning process and the leadership of the city. So we're just showing removal of another fragment of that original parking lot, building a new facility completely free of the existing facilities. So again, the library can stay in operation while you're building the new library. In this case, we're essentially taking this hermetic volume of the existing library and unfurling it so that the interior spaces of the library are able to look out onto the park open space, which again is expanded once you remove the existing library. I'll take you through this now in plans. Some people are more readily able to read plans than the aerial diagrams. So there you see the existing library in red. Here you see now in red the removal of the parking lots at the corner of Yale and the freeway. The building of the new Consolidated Community and Fine Arts Center along with the consolidated parking and the new structure there adjacent to the freeway. The removal of the Fine Arts and Community Center, the expansion of park open space, an interim condition where you've kept the existing library and have a new community center and fine arts center with expanded park open space. Eventually, the removal of the remainder of that old parking lots, the building of the new library in its place. We can rotate the plan once again. Here you see how the building has been unfurled. So from the parking entrance, immediately access to children, to the marketplace to the right, young adults, community meeting room with a separate entrance at the end. And here again, all three cohorts now have direct visual relationship with an expanded heritage park, which you can see in this view now looking from the park to the pond to our back, looking back towards the new building, children on the right, young adults, and adults on the left. Interestingly enough, the arrival court, which remains at the current vehicular axis, can now, in place of a parking lot, be expanded toward becoming a community plaza, which can accept all sorts of community events. This in place of what now is a sea of parking that you have to negotiate to get from the road to the entrance to any of the facilities. What's currently in front of the Fine Arts and Community Arts Center can now be turned into essentially a kind of intimately scaled neighborhood street with parallel parking, a drive that takes you to the parking garage beyond, while library frontage and a broad wide sidewalk and seating and whatnot configures the front, the Yale frontage and across its length. So here you see on the left the existing condition. It's fictitious long-term transformation on the right. Again, all as an exercise to demonstrate to council the feasibility of a new and expanded library on this site, perhaps in concert with new and expanded community and fine arts facilities. And here you see how just the one move of consolidating parking at the one corner in a structured facility, maintaining pickup and drop off both for the park and for the library and community facilities, the diagram in the lower right, greatly expands on the upper right, the functionality and the aesthetic qualities of an expanded heritage park, with now the pond occupying the center of the park rather than being crowded out by the facilities currently on its one side. Finally, the fourth and final site under consideration is in Bill Barber Park at the corner of Barranca and Harvard. it serves both 5 and 6, and in particular, we're particularly pleased that it actually serves quite well University Town Center, which when University Park Library closes may have been cut out of the system, but in fact, because of Harvard Avenue, it's very easy to get down to the Civic Center from that neighborhood. So we're quite pleased that all of 6 and all of 5 will be served by this combined branch facility at Bill Barber Park, what we're calling the Civic Center main library. The site is shown in red on the upper right. It's approximately a 7-acre site. We'd maintain the vehicular access there, the main one being at San Juan and Harvard Avenue. We would keep the existing parking lot, expand it by 150 parking spaces in that area between the existing parking lot and the existing tennis courts. But again, you would arrive at the same spot. What's important to us is that this new facility has a relationship to the park, even to the city's civic center and to the street. This is a more, I think it's fair to say, urban condition than the other 3 that I've shown. And we do want to take advantage of some key amenities that are in this park, for example, the formal garden and the rather expansive children's playground area, in such a way that both those facilities and the library have mutually beneficial relationships to one another. So here's now a more rendered aerial view of what that could look like. You see pretty formal frontage along Harvard Avenue, we believe appropriate for a library of this stature. This is the view now with our backs to City Hall across that beautiful lawn that runs along Harvard Avenue. There you see the children's on the left, the main library components on the right. As we move around to the San Juan vehicular entrance, you see the arrival court from one angle, from the other now the parking lots as you're approaching the building. And here you see now on the right the existing formal garden in a way that the library takes advantage of it, and the formal garden is able to take advantage of now a library next to it, which will invest it with lots more vitality, people making use of it associated with the library. So here's a map of the 4 views I just showed you to help you understand the diagram. And again, the blue and green diagrams to help us understand the cost of development, how those components relate to the site, larger site in general, and how the building itself relates to each of the components of the park on one side and the street and neighborhood on the other side. We can take a look now at how this is a 2-story library would be laid out. The arrival court, the vehicular entrance on the right, community meeting rooms, marketplace, Friends of the Library bookstore, cafe in this case, because this beautiful formal garden there that you could take advantage of. Adults at that key spot looking back towards City Hall. Children having spun out now so that it has a more direct relationship to the existing children's playground at the heart of the park. The second floor would be more adult reading space, periodicals, young adults, some research areas, and in this case, central staff, administrative staff. Julie's group runs the whole system, which we felt appropriate. I think everyone agrees, staff agrees, community agrees, located at the Civic Center site since they are part of the Community Services Department and have direct relationship with everyone who's working over at City Hall. Here's a view now from the entrance, the formal garden and children's wing on the right, circulation services leading towards the main double height adult reading room. There you see in the distance off on the left is City Hall across the length of that beautiful green lawn. Children's wing on the right. Up at the second floor is another reading room, a quite formal one, which relates to and attaches to a terrace which could sit on the roof of the children's wing, affording views north across Orange County, actually, towards the mountains, San Gabriel Mountains beyond. It could be quite beautiful opportunity for outdoor reading on this very active city park in a way that doesn't take any of the city park. And here we are at one part of the children's library looking back towards the children's playground. So there are the views that are showing you, and again, showing you how interior spaces really should have a relationship to their surroundings in such a way that both the interior spaces and the surroundings benefit from the presence of one another. See the arrival court on the left, the formal garden in the center, the children's playground on the right. And from the other side, you see how in the lower right, the main double height adult reading room really takes advantage of that large expanse of lawn there parallel along Harvard Avenue towards City Hall, and how the children's library takes it, and the rooftop terrace in particular in that reading room up there, take advantage of the views across the park and the county to the north. So those are the 4 sites that were presented. These are the 4 questions that were asked. There was a fair amount of discussion about each of them, and also District 4 and University Park. Some expressed priority of which libraries they would start with. I would say there's been emerging consensus that certainly Great Park and Civic Center may be a good starting point to get the system build out started. But of course, that's completely up to council. So thank you for listening. We hope you continue to participate. And if not sooner, we'll see you in October 14th, at the City Council meeting, in which this will be presented. Thank you very much.